welcome to the Controller Talk podcast presented by Danfoss North America. Our goal is to bring you information about using Danfoss controls in the supermarket and warehouse industry, specifically in the U.S. and Canada. We're doing these twice a month for now. You can catch these podcasts wherever you get your podcast, and it's also available through the Danfoss Ref Tools app. For the video version, check us out on the Danfoss North America YouTube page. Search for Controller Talk to see our video collection. I'm Dave Yoder, along with Chris Brown. Chris, it's time for season 3.
Welcome back. It's been a while.
That's right. Yeah, seems like a long time. But we've both been doing all kinds of stuff, traveling. I've been on the West Coast.
You're a new man when it comes to CO2.
That's right. Yeah. Come on. It's a lot's happened since January. That's for sure.
Listeners might not recognize you.
That's right. I get to meet some of them on the West Coast.
There you go.
Believe it or not. Yeah. It's been good. Yeah. How those Ravens doing?
Next subject.
Next question.
When season 4 start? We're not off to a good start here.
Well, you know, when you're 0-2, you can only go up.
Yeah. Orioles aren't looking good right now. Ravens aren't looking good. It's not good times.
Okay. How about Maryland football?
So-so. So-so.
All right. Still early.
Yeah.
Yeah. They haven't played Penn State yet.
Yeah.
It's the last game of the season.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
We got the new Big Ten now that some games you got to go all the way to the West Coast for.
That's right. Yep.
So it's, a different year.
That's right. Yep. So, yeah, we'll have to have some kind of friendly wager for the Maryland game.
There you go. I'm not putting a Penn State hat on if you're...
That's a great idea, though. All right. So, yeah, you've been doing CO2 stuff. I've been doing CO2 stuff. But I think for season 3, we're going to talk about a little bit of everything and kind of cover some things that people have been asking about and kind of see where it leads.
Yep.
We'll probably throw in an interview or two here and there and kind of see what happens here.
Yep, things are changing constantly here, so still plenty to talk about.
Right, yep. So, as far as the system manager, 800A, that's still our flagship controller. And we call it the touchscreen controller around here. But since we last had a podcast, there's been some new software come out, and we should talk about some of that stuff. So, the first thing in the new software, which is like a 4.0 version, has to do with a stepper module that we've been selling for a few years that has 4 stepper outputs and then 8 analog inputs you can use as well. Yeah, so 208C, this is our stepper module. It's been around for a while, so it's not that the module itself is new. We've used it with our pack controllers on CO2 installations for quite a few years now. So we know it's a module that's functional and has some experience in the market. Usually, up to this point, the usage has been to drive the CCM, CCMT valves, things like that on a CO2 booster system. Now, with the ability to tie this in through a communication module directly to the system manager, this is going to replace some of that functionality that we used to have with the old 208B stepper module. So when you're looking at mainly EEPR applications through the system manager, where we would drive a stepper valve open and closed that's on the suction line side of the evaporator. The 208Bs kind of fall into the wayside here with the 208C taking its place. So it's definitely some good to it. It does have 8 analog inputs at the top of it, like you mentioned, which the 208B didn't. So that could save you some space from a module standpoint and give you some inputs there. On the output side of the module, it has some higher amperage ratings, so it can handle some valves that the 208B couldn't when you're talking about something like the CCMT valves specifically again. So there's some functional upgrades to it from those standpoints. It is only going to be functional with the 4.0 version, so you could see some situations where you might think you're okay. It'll allow you to configure it because the point addressing is all going to be entered the same. But just, this is definitely something you want to make sure that you're checking, is that if you're going to use new installation or a replacement, the 208C module, that your software version in the system manager is this 4.0 or higher, or else it won't fully function with that module. Yep. And the 208C includes the filter.
Yes.
Inside the module itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's a good point, too, that we used to have that external filter with the 208B to lengthen the distance on your cable run out to the valve. You don't want to use that if you're replacing a 208B with a C. You're going to want to eliminate that filter. Yeah, that's all inherent with the module itself now, and so your valve wiring is just going to go directly to the plug on the board.
Yep. And I imagine we have to keep the 208B around because there's so many installations. For the past 20 years, we've been using that for stepper valve control on the I/O side of things. So we would have to keep that around for any replacements that come up. But honestly, I don't see many 208Bs getting replaced just because there's some kind of module failure.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and then on the 208C, if you're going to dive in with that one, you just have to be aware that there's some wiring changes versus the 208B on when it comes to wiring up the 4-wire valves.
I think is it the third and fourth legs that are reversed on there?
Right, yeah, which usually ends up being the red and green.
Yeah. So you'll be, if you're replacing that situation, a B with a C, then you'd be reversing those 2 wires, and the data sheet calls that out. So never hurts to glance over the data sheets that are available in the product store for these modules if you're actively working on something and putting a new one in. But you want to make sure you're doing that, or else you may not be driving your valve to the proper opening degree.
Right, so you just have to kind of do a little homework before you do your first job, basically. Yep. Okay, so I think that covers everything on the 208C stepper module, and then we'll talk about a few other things here going on with this new version of software. So there is, especially in the European Union, there's a higher security level required on these controllers because they go on networks. And we've implemented in version 4 something called strict mode, which affects remote communication and XML communication. And when you upgrade to this version 4.0, it's going to, by default, go into what we call strict mode. And then you really need to have somebody at the location to be able to push the button. Even before it asks for a password, there's an option to either keep strict mode or go with something called backwards compatibility. And from talking to people in different areas of the globe, backwards compatibility is most often what you're going to want to pick so that you can keep your HTTP connection and your port 80 or whatever port you're using. But most of the time, you'll pick backwards compatibility right on the screen so that you can maintain the communication you have.
Yeah, I think we don't want our controller to be the weak point in a network, and so these options are being added, but at the same time, I think a lot of customers look at their own security and network things that, for lack of better terms, that are in place as the only point that they really need to worry about to prevent hacking or anything along those lines. So this upgrade is going to give you some prompts and these things, but typically, like you said, we're just using this backwards compatibility option to kind of stick with what we had prior to the upgrade.
To keep us up to speed on and compliant with new laws and new legislation that could be worldwide, we have to create the options for these kind of security features. It's if you're going to upgrade, then it's best to have someone on site because that person will get you away from strict mode and back to backward compatibility. And that'll also affect XML. If you're doing XML commands, you just need to be aware of whether or not there is authentication and things like that are included in those commands, because otherwise you'll send the commands out and you just won't get any response from the unit.
Yep. And it's not a all or nothing deal. If you choose the wrong option, there is a screen you can go into now that says security at the top of your configuration options where you have your other tabs normally. You can always go in there and change it to a different choice if you need to.
Yep. I think in the security menu, the only option they put in there is the ability to turn HTTPS on and off.
Yeah.
But that's one way to see what's happening, but that is a new feature.
Yep. I think the good news with this upgrade is you don't have to worry about Danix. So but some of our software upgrades, you also have to make sure you're updating Danix, which takes a little more time, not much, but it's one more step you got to worry about. With this 4.0 upgrade, if you're coming from the previous version, 3.3, there's nothing you need to worry about on the Danix side. So it is just the software upgrade itself that's going to need to take place.
Yeah, so typically that software upgrade only takes about a minute, maybe 2 minutes per unit.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's a matter of continuous improvement is what these software versions are all about. And then we expect before the end of the year, there'll probably be a version 4.1 get released.
Yep, and I think that one may have a Danix upgrade from what I've seen. So, I mean, unless you're using a 208C or you've got some very specific reason to go to 4.0, probably fine just to hold off for now. And yeah, 4.1 and then any other upgrades we've got after that.
Yeah.
Nothing different from what people have done in the past. It's once you go to this version, then you'll have to worry about these things, but not necessarily saying go out tomorrow and upgrade your stores to 4.0.
Right. A lot of the stores, at least in the U.S., are running a 3.2 and a 3.3 and doing fine.
Yep.
So yeah, those are okay.
Yeah, because outside of these things you talked about here, there wasn't a ton that was added in to the upgrade from 3.3 at least.
Right.
Just a few small things.
Yep. Okay. All right, let's move on to, now that we've got all the sports sadness out of you, let's talk about Stump Chris.
Great, let's just pile on.
That's right. Yeah, I have no plans of doing Stump Dave this year, so we'll just keep.
We're going to have to change this at some point. I'm being lazy here, not coming up with things to throw back at you.
That's right. Well, fortunately, I've come up with something for you. Yeah, so this new version 4.0 software includes the ability to have how many circuits per suction group now.
Ooh.
Yeah. Did you read the fine print?
Nah, come on. Circuits per suction group.
Yeah. Now it's kind of a.
Felt like
it
was 99 before.
You're correct about that part.
It's higher now.
It is higher now.
Let's go. 120 feels like a good number.
It is a good number, but it's a wrong number.
Are we shocked really at this point in the game?
So yeah, you can do 160 circuits per suction group now.
So kind of lined up with how many generic devices you could have.
Right, on Modbus especially, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now that means you're going to, if you put 160 circuits in one suction group, you're pretty much done. It's not like you can add a bunch more suction groups to get more circuits.
Yeah.
Because you're going to run out of nodes. So somewhere you're going to max out there.
Even the 99 I felt like was sufficient.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's designing a system with 106, but okay.
Yeah, but yeah, there was a request to go over 99.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. Yep.
I'd like to see that system.
Right. Probably not in the U.S.
Yeah.
All right. So how about listener mail? So yeah, it's actually from a real person who I met out on the West Coast. And Eddie wanted to know if we would do a podcast on backing up the system manager and the pack controller.
Okay.
So legitimate request, legitimate person, actual email. So I think we should do that.
I say we do it. Very near future.
Yeah, it's a great idea. So yeah, we'll take that one on.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Hey, if you'd like to drop us an email with a suggestion, like Eddie did, for topics to cover, or a question or comment, you can email us at controllertalknorthamerica@danfoss.com. Thanks for listening. Our audio engineer is Raul Garcia. Maria is here making sure all of this gets off the ground. Josh is nowhere to be found, as usual. Does he still work here?
Josh who?
Exactly. So, Josh, if you're out there, phone in. We haven't heard from you for a while. Until next time, for Chris Brown, I'm Dave Yoder. Stay cool.